Welcome to another episode of What Are You Writing? What Are You Reading? I'm Karen Osborne, for those of you who perhaps this is your first time, and those of you that are returning, we're so glad to see you. I am the author of Getting It Right and my upcoming murder mystery, Tangled Lies, which comes out on July 22nd. And I am so excited about today's guest. You're going to love him. So, Philip, I have to read his list of wonderful, wonderful books. He's so versatile as a writer. You know, he writes every type of genre. So this is the list of Philip Robinson's books. He's a gifted poet. So his first book was Secret Passages, a trilogy of thought. Right now, available on Amazon, he has We Still Leave a Legacy, which is one of my favorite books of poetry. So you've probably heard me mention this one before. And In the Trenches, the voice of a guidance counselor. And then he has a new upcoming book, which we're going to talk about, which is A Chair at Any Table and Other Tales. And it's a memoir of poetry. It's a memoir and a poetry collection dedicated to his mom. You can find Philip at www.philiprobinsonpoet.com. Welcome, Phil.
Wow. Well, thank you for having me, Karen. This is really exciting. I like how we're able to come up with things that are part of our pastime during this pandemic. And hopefully they will sustain us even beyond the pandemic. So this is
Yes.
really nice. I appreciate you doing this too.
You
Get the
know,
word.
I was thinking, because you're in a snowstorm now, aren't you? Or was
Yeah,
yesterday?
it's coming. I'm looking out the window. They say it's a nor'easter, but I don't know what a nor'easter is. Is it just snow? Because they said it's going to be snow and rain
And wind and
and wind.
wind.
Oh, the wind is out there. Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Lots of wind. And it reminds me that before the pandemic, you know, perhaps we would have done this in person. We'd
Oh,
have planned to do this in person, and then the weather would have prevented us. So,
there it is. So there it is. That's what I'm saying. People are looking at
so
all those factors. They say, you know what? The show, literally and figuratively, can go on.
can go on. So before we talk about your wonderful writing and your books, I
Mhm.
wondered if you could share with our audience a book that you've read recently that you just loved.
Well, I'm so glad you asked me that because it's called Helium, like the helium balloon, but it's called Helium. And I just happen to have a copy of it to do a promotion.
Hold it
It's
up a little
writ-
higher.
it's written by this young man, young in that he's 38, Black poet, spoken word poet, out from San Diego, California. This is one of his 6 books of
Wow.
poetry. His name is Rudy Francisco. And it's one of 6 of his books. And I just happened to come upon him, talk about social media. I read about him on Facebook. He was advertising his book, and I started reading it. I said, oh, this sounds interesting. And then, being a person of color, I identify with young poets,
Mhm.
younger than me, but who are bringing a voice, maybe a different voice, into the arena. And I love reading stuff like that from young people. And his was so riveting, it's engaging, it's poignant. It really is like on the edge of your feet kind of reading. I mean, he has
Mm.
these different genres that he writes about: love, hate, family, the different dimensions of life. But one thing I would say about his poetry is almost like it's a book on display and in search on high for a kind of love all humans need and deserve.
Mm.
It's written so well that I've ordered his other book, which is I Fly Away, which is the next book I'll read, but I'm reading something else too. So before
Of
you know,
course.
yeah, simultaneously. But I do highly recommend it. It's called Helium by Rudy Francisco.
Oh,
And
that sounds wonderful. I will look forward to reading that. That's been one of the best things about this series, is that I've been introduced to books that I would not have come across. And
uh,
so now my reading list is getting taller and taller, but that's a good thing.
That is,
That's a wonderful thing. Did you have another book that you wanted to mention?
well, the one that I'm reading, the present one that I'm reading now, oh, one of my favorites. One of my favorites, and you may have heard of her, I'm sure you have. Lucille Clifton. She's a
Mm,
writer in the vein of, there's Toni Morrison is to fiction, she is to poetry. I'm reading her collection of poems,
mm,
which is from 1965 to 210. And the interesting thing about it, it's a compilation of all of her poetry books put into one. Now, the thing that I find very exciting about her is that she writes up some themes similar to mine. She has a strong declaration of racial pride, courage, and steadfastness. And so those woven into each other, oh, it's a beautiful read. She's
mm.
been someone thrilling to just immerse yourself. And you see how big the book is. I can continually read in her for a long period of time. But one thing that she says that's on my tablet that I have upstairs, my writing tablet, and I'll share with you. She said, poetry is a matter of life, not just a matter of language. And I love
Mm.
that quote. I love
Yes.
it because it really just, it says so much about poets, writers, but in terms of how the language is really what drives a story, as you know yourself. And it is so true. But each one of these give a different kind of spectrum of life, but they both present life in their own way. So
Oh,
you have Rudy and you have Lucille, and it's really a nice balance to have them too. Because I go
it's
between
very
the two.
generational too.
And generational. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Just recently read where I believe it's in some place in upstate New York, they're going to have a Lucille Clifford home, like make it into a little shrine or place
Little
where people,
museum.
yes, a little museum. So I said, wow, this is really nice. Talk about a legacy. And again,
Yeah.
thank you for your kind words on my book, We Still Leave a Legacy too, because that really meant a lot to me as a fellow writer.
Yeah. Oh, I loved, I have gone back to it. And
Mhm.
I highly recommend it to you, all of you that are listening, as well with the other two books. But
Yeah.
I want to hear about now. I want to hear about this memoir that's coming out. Tell us about it.
Wow. Well, it's interesting, as you mentioned, and I thank you. It's called A Chair at Any Table and Other Tales. And it's written for my late mom who died last August at the age of 97.
Mm,
Here is a woman who raised almost single-handedly 6 children on her own, with the support of social services, welfare notwithstanding. And one of the things that is sort of like a highlight of what I remember most about my mom is that she didn't have a formal education. In fact, she merely went up to the 8th grade, but
mm,
she encouraged all of us, almost mandated all of us, that we had to get an education. So out of the 6 of us, 2 sisters, 4 brothers, 4 of us did do college, advanced degrees, etc. So it almost fits into each generation supposed to do better than the following one or the previous one, so to
mhm,
speak. But she was always encouraging and committed to her family in terms of making sure we had all of what we needed, be it camp money, be it clothes on our back, food in the mouth, and a roof over our head. And we lived in subsidized housing in New York on the Lower East Side of Manhattan
mm,
and the housing projects. But she never meant for us to feel like we had nothing. In fact, the reason why I call it a chair at any table, because not only did she tell me I could sit at any table, she made it possible through me getting an education that I can feel I could talk to almost anyone on any level. Now, there may be some things that go over my head a little bit, but the mere fact that I feel I could sit at any table. And then the other tales, of course, is talking about how my development became part of her inexhaustible support that Philip, you can be anyone that you want to be.
mm.
So hence the title. I'm looking forward
Yes.
to it. It should be out this spring, I think April. Hopefully, cross fingers. That's a pivotal month. It almost will come out, coincide with my birthday, which will be nice. But at least I know it's in the works. It's at the next,
Yes.
it's with the publisher.
That sounds wonderful. I really look forward to reading this. I've been working on a memoir of my grandmother, uh, as which I'm finding I'm speaking as if I'm my grandmother, which is an interesting way so I guess it's not really a memoir. It's fiction, but it's based on my grandmother's life. And she would have loved that. She would have loved the notion of a chair at any table. She was a woman of great courage. Yeah.
And the interesting thing, just so briefly about the process, I've had some little bumps in the road as a writer would have, writing the book, a little of this, a little of that. But the process has been enriching for me because each time I had a little halt to the process, I came up with another poem about my mother. So it was very advantageous. In fact, I've added, since I knew this was something I wanted to put forth, I've added, and since my mother's passed in August, I put 2 new poems in there about her. So the process, and I like the fact that I haven't really rushed with the process of getting it done, but it's allowed me to really go into the woodshed and come up with some new. And
When you lean forward, I can't hear you. No. Gotta sleep back.
Okay, lean back. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. So it's been a nice, interesting process to be able to, have the editing of those who read it, and then me also adding new things in, but all come forward into what it actually will become in April.
So how did you know that writing and poetry was your calling? Like what started that?
Well, it's interesting. I came to Boston, where I presently live, in a little enclave called West Roxbury. But I came here about 51 years ago to go to school, undergraduate school, Emerson College, known for oratory, speech, and stuff like that. And while I was there, a lot of different themes came to me. I was away from home. My sexual identity was developing in terms of who I am, who I want to be, who do I want to be with. So a lot of different themes were happening. So I just took to pen to paper and started writing. And at that time, I really didn't have an idea that I was going to go full-fledged into writing, but it was therapeutic for me. And that's what I found to be most comforting, is that it was a therapeutic tool for me to really work through some of those things that I was developing in my head or developing within me in terms of who am I? How am I existing as a Black gay man here in Boston? Who are my contacts? Who will be the people I talk to? And interestingly enough, I remember this, and this is something I always will remember. I was walking down one of our main streets here in Boston. It's called Beacon Street, where Emerson College is located on. And I ran into 2 former classmates of mine, and they said, "Phil, you look bewildered. Is there something wrong?" I said, "Well, I'm thinking of what."
Oh, we're losing you.
They said, "What are you thinking of, Philip?" And I said, "I'm thinking of writing, but I don't know what to write about." They said, "You will always find something to write about." And it was true. At that moment, I started letting myself just think and not worry about what it's going to be. And it just evolved. And the way that it's involved, again, it's like it's been something that's really cathartic for me. I really feel that I have something that I needed to get out. But interestingly enough, Karen, and I'm sure you can relate to this, when I shared it with other folks, they said, "Wow, I know what that feels like. I had the same feeling. You did that?" So there was a universality to it that just overwhelmed me to a point. I said, "Well, you know what? Stay on point, Phil. Just stay on point." And when you have those low points when you're not writing, doesn't mean you're not still thinking. Because you're reading, that means you're taking in new information. And as a writer, of course, as you know, we should be reading other stuff too, just to let those energies flow and continually generate new thoughts and ideas.
Yeah. I don't know any writers who aren't also, ferocious readers.
Oh my God.
Because we have to.
Oh my
We love books.
Oh my God, magazines, the New York Times is sitting here from Sunday, still ready for me to read more of it. But my writing took on an energy that I really began to appreciate, that this must be my calling. And so I went with it. I delayed it for a while and went on to graduate school. Think I was going to teach English, which was still connecting. I came out of undergrad thinking that maybe I'll go teach for a while. And I went to teach, but the writing was still calling me. Even as I went on and got my graduate degree in counseling psychology, the writing was still calling me. So I would write in between studying, write in between taking exams. So it became something onto its own. And of course, now that I'm retired, I can write at any time.
To write
There's no
all the time.
all the time. You know, it's never late if I'm up at 12:30 because I don't have to get up at 5:30 to go to work, you know, because
Well,
there's
well,
excitement to it as well.
it is. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you guys will pick up, what Phil said was that people found his poetry so universal, and yet they also speak to very specific experiences. And I think that's something very powerful about it. And I know you'll enjoy his poetry very much. And we all are looking forward to your memoir coming out in April. Thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you at the next episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing?
Yeah. And thank you, Karen. Thank you. Bye.